Hey there, and welcome to Cozy Side Audio. Settle in with a soft-spoken story to help you relax, study, or drift into sleep. If you enjoy these gentle tales, tap like, share the calm, and subscribe for more cozy moments. Cozy Side Audio presents Mailbox 199, Chapter 1, The Boy and the Woods. The world always felt loud to Eli Whitlock. It wasn't just the chaos of school hallways or the metallic clatter of cafeteria trays. It was the way voices could ricochet through your ribs, how fluorescent lights buzzed with a kind of invisible pressure, how questions like, "Why are you so quiet?" never sounded curious, only accusatory. Even home wasn't silent, not really. The television murmured on in the living room whether anyone was watching or not. His mom's exhausted footsteps whispered up and down the hallway long after midnight. The fridge hummed like it was thinking too hard. But the woods were different. They began at the edge of a weather-worn soccer field no one used anymore, where rust crept up the goalposts and the grass grew wild. A worn dirt path veined through the trees, barely wide enough for a bike, narrowing the deeper you went. The forest didn't roar like school, didn't drone like the TV. It breathed. It rustled softly, creaked gently, and sometimes, even though Eli knew it was impossible, it felt like it was listening. That afternoon, Eli rode out farther than usual. He didn't know why. There'd been no fight at school, no bruising embarrassment to run from, just the same dull ache of being misplaced. He should have been doing homework or setting the table or pretending to care about dinner conversation. But the thought of it all felt itchy, too tight. So he pedaled past the clearing, through the narrow gap between the birch trunks, and deeper into the unfamiliar. The trail disintegrated after a while. Brambles snagged his hoodie. He pushed the bike along a slope that curved downward, where the trees grew closer together and the ground felt soft and forgotten. His sneakers squelched against wet leaves. A crow startled from a branch above him, flapping away with a rattle of feathers and shadow. That's when he saw it. Just off the slope, past a curtain of vines, sat an old mailbox. It stood crooked on a wooden post, the kind you might find at the end of a long gravel driveway, except there was no house, no cabin, no road, just moss, tree roots, and silence. The metal was a dull gray-green, pitted with age, and the red flag perched on its side was up, raised. Eli stared. He didn't move right away. His fingers gripped the bike handlebars even though his arms were sore. Wind moved gently through the trees, but the mailbox didn't creak or shift. It just sat there, waiting. That's what it felt like. Not abandoned, not forgotten. Waiting. After a full minute of indecision, Eli left his bike resting against a tree and stepped closer. The air smelled of wet bark and earth. The wooden post holding the box looked like it had once been painted red, but now it was almost entirely chipped and gray. He reached out a hand, paused, then brushed away a thin cobweb clinging to the metal handle. The door squealed open. Inside was a single envelope. No stamps, no return address, just his name, written in shaky pencil across the front. Eli W. His breath caught. It wasn't just the name, it was the handwriting. It looked familiar, like his own, but less practiced, less careful, like how he used to write in third grade before teachers started docking points for messy letters. The capital E curved the same way his always had. Eli stared at the envelope like it might bite. Eventually, he sat on the ground, legs crossed in the moss. His hands trembled as he peeled it open. Inside, there was only a single sheet of lined notebook paper, ripped from a spiral-bound journal. He unfolded it. The writing inside wasn't neat. Words drifted up and down the lines, letters squeezed tight in places, stretched out in others. There were smudges either from dirt or tears, he couldn't tell. He began to read. "Dear me, I think, if you're reading this, it means the mailbox still works. I don't know exactly how or why. It's not like we have science books anymore. Most of them burned with the rest of the school. But I kept this notebook, and when I found the mailbox, I knew I had to try. I don't know where you are or who you are, but if you're another Eli, I guess I just want someone to know I'm still here, even if it's only in words. It's been 184 days since the sky changed. The clouds don't move anymore. They're just stuck, frozen in place like old photographs. The ground still shakes sometimes, not like earthquakes, more like breathing. Slow, deep breaths under the soil. We stopped going into the city weeks ago. There's nothing left there but broken glass and quiet. There's 6 of us now. There used to be 13. I don't know how to fix anything. I don't know if there's anything left to fix, but I keep thinking if there's another version of me out there. Maybe you're doing better. Maybe you still have school and homework and arguments with your mom. Maybe you still wake up to birdsong instead of silence. So please don't waste it. I guess that's all I really wanted to say. You're not alone. Not even when you think you are. From Eli, version 12. Eli didn't realize he'd stopped breathing until his chest started to ache. He folded the paper slowly, fingers numb. The silence around him had shifted, deepened. Not dangerous, but heavy, meaningful. He looked up at the trees, the still gray sky, the wind barely stirring the branches overhead, then back to the envelope in his lap. Was it a joke? Someone messing with him? But who would go through that much effort? No one knew he came out here. No one at school even noticed him half the time. And even if someone had forged the letter, how did they know his handwriting? He didn't know what to do with the letter. He slipped it into his hoodie pocket, stood up slowly, and walked back to his bike. The forest felt different now. Not darker, not colder, just aware, as if it had been watching all along. As if the trees had seen him open the letter and were quietly nodding to themselves. He didn't sleep well that night. The letter sat on his desk, weighed down by an old rock he'd painted as a kid. He didn't tell his mom. He didn't know how to explain it. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the crooked mailbox and the words, "You're not alone." In the morning, he went back. The forest smelled of wet leaves and the faint sweetness of mushrooms. The path was easier to follow now, like his feet remembered it better than his mind did. When he reached the mailbox, the red flag was still up. He opened it slowly. Empty. Something in him sagged with disappointment. Maybe it had been a one-time thing, a strange prank, a dream he'd mistaken for memory. But then he noticed something small, barely visible beneath the mailbox post. Pencil, sharpened to a stub. Next to it, a blank page. Someone had left him a reply station. Eli stared at the paper for a long time. The breeze moved gently through the leaves, waiting. He sat down, picked up the pencil, and began to write. Dear Eli, version 12. I don't know how this works either, but I'm here, and I heard you, and I believe you. From Eli, I think. He folded the letter, slipped it into the mailbox, closed the door. The flag stayed up. As he walked away, he didn't feel alone. Not exactly. Chapter 2. The Many Me's. The pencil was gone the next time Eli returned. 3 days had passed since he slipped his letter into the mailbox. He'd visited each afternoon, sometimes twice, but the box stayed stubbornly shut and silent, its red flag still cocked at attention like a soldier waiting for orders. He didn't dare tell anyone, certainly not his mom, whose gaze seemed more and more distracted lately, or any kids at school, where conversations always felt like parties he hadn't been invited to. But on the 4th day, when the wind was sharp and full of pine and the clouds hovered like low-hanging questions, the mailbox door resisted when he opened it. Something inside. He froze, every part of him tensing as if he'd stepped on invisible ice. The paper was folded more neatly this time. No envelope, no name, just the crinkled weight of a new voice. Eli opened it right there, hands cold, breath hanging in front of him like smoke. And as his eyes slid over the first lines, his stomach twisted with something that wasn't fear exactly, but not comfort either. Hey, you me? Okay. I'm officially weirded out. Not in a bad way, just weirded. You wrote back. I wasn't expecting that. I thought I was screaming into a void. A cosmic void. Not the regular kind. But then you sent a letter and I thought, well, crap. Guess I'm not alone after all. I don't know where to start, so I guess I'll just talk. That's what you do on stage, right? You start talking and pray something real comes out. Yeah. I'm a stage kid. Don't laugh. I joined the school drama club last year because I thought it would help me stop turning into a socially awkward stone during conversations. And honestly, kind of worked. I still panic before every performance, but there's something wild and wonderful about stepping into someone else's shoes, even if they're sweaty and too small and tied wrong. Anyway, I'm in the middle of rehearsals for Much Ado About Nothing. Ever heard of it? Shakespeare. Lots of witty insults and people pretending not to be in love with each other. I'm playing Benedict. He's this smart-mouthed guy who's secretly terrified of being vulnerable. This relatable. I bombed my first audition, by the way. Forgot 3 whole lines, then tripped over a folding chair on the way out. Everyone laughed. Not in a mean way, just amused. Like I was entertainment before the real show started. I almost didn't come back. But the director called me a week later. Said I had presence. I didn't believe her. Still don't some days. Anyway, I don't know if you've ever done something that scared the crap out of you but still made you feel more alive than anything else, but if you haven't, find that thing. It's worth it. Even when your voice shakes. Even when your heart beats so loud you think the people in the back row can hear it. Especially then. Sincerely, you with stage fright and a spotlight. Eli stared at the letter for a long time, rereading it twice. Then again. There was something almost dizzying about the tone. Lively, self-deprecating, bursting with breathless humor. It was like watching himself through a funhouse mirror. Twisted just enough to be unfamiliar, but close enough to recognize the face inside. A version of himself that could stand in front of strangers, make them laugh, speak without flinching. It didn't seem possible. He looked down at his own hands, the paper still clutched between them. They were shaking a little, not from cold. When he finally stood up and left the woods, his thoughts trailed behind him like a second shadow. He wrote back that night. He used notebook paper and the stubby pencil he found in the junk drawer beside the sink. Every few minutes, he'd stop and stare at the blank page, unsure whether he was allowed to talk back like this. But the mailbox had given him a letter. Felt like permission. To me, but way braver. You sound like the kind of person I watch from the back of the room and pretend not to admire. You make it sound easy even though I know it's not. It's funny how we envy things in others we might already have the seeds for. I think I'd like to try something like that someday. Maybe not a play, but something that makes my heart beat louder. Maybe writing back to you is that thing. Thanks for making me feel less like a ghost. Sincerely, Eli, with slightly fewer guts. He folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his hoodie pocket. The walk to the woods felt shorter than usual. Or maybe it just felt right, like retracing steps in a dream you don't want to end. The flag was still up. He opened the door and slid the paper inside, closing it gently. The mailbox made a soft clink, and the woods settled around him like an old coat. He didn't leave right away, just stood there listening. The forest always had its own language, a rhythmic symphony of rustling leaves, the brittle snap of distant branches, the hush of wind tracing old roots. Today, it felt like the world was holding its breath with him. The next letter came 2 days later. It was thick, for full pages, written in looping cursive and smudged at the corners. The opening line stopped him cold. Dear Eli, I wish I knew how to tell you this without sounding like a jerk. But here it is. I envy you. Your quiet, your space, your stillness. I don't get much of that here. I got friends, sure. Good ones. The kind you see in cheesy movies with campfires and midnight confessions and shared secrets. I have a dad who teaches physics and likes to cook breakfast on Saturdays. I have a little sister who steals my socks and tells me I smell weird. It's a good life. but I never get to breathe. Everyone wants something. Everyone's moving, talking, expecting. Sometimes I walk into a room and forget who I'm supposed to be. Sometimes I watch someone like you, quiet, careful, anchored, and I wonder what it would be like to live inside your stillness for a day, to just be. I think that's what this mailbox is for. Not answers, not magic, just seeing each other. Thanks for being there. With admiration, Eli, surrounded, and still somehow lonely. Eli read that one sitting cross-legged in the leaves, head bowed like it was a prayer. The other versions of himself weren't just echoes. They were people, real and vulnerable and full of their own tangled knots. It hadn't occurred to him that someone else, he himself in another place, might look at his life with longing. He didn't reply that night. He just walked home in silence and made tea. He added too much honey, then drank it anyway. The third letter came folded into a piece of torn notebook cardboard. It had ink stains along the edge, like someone had knocked over a bottle mid-sentence. The writing was sharper, angrier, hurried. Eli, you don't know what it's like to be the background character in your own story. You think you're shy? Try being invisible. Try being the joke everyone forgets they told. Try walking past someone every day and having them look right through you like you're a smudge on a window. I've stopped trying. Not to be seen, just to care. And I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because someone told me once that talking to yourself is still better than silence. So here's my voice. Use it if you want. Burn it if you don't. I don't care anymore. The paper was damp when he finished reading it. Not from the woods. From him. That night, Eli wrote for hours. Not just to one Eli. To all of them. Little messages scrawled out and folded like secrets. He wrote with a kind of desperation. Not panicked, not scared. Just full. Full of words and warmth and this rising ache to connect, to understand, to give back. By morning, he had 5 folded pages in his pocket. He dropped them all into the mailbox one by one. When he walked away, he didn't look back. But if he had, he would have seen the flag slowly, silently lower itself. Like the woods were nodding. Like the mailbox was smiling. Chapter 3, The Mirror Maze. The leaves turned brittle the week the mirror letters began. It happened quietly. One morning the forest wore green, and by the next, it had slipped into rust and amber, like an old quilt laid across the trees. Eli didn't notice it right away. He wasn't watching the leaves. He was watching the mailbox. Every day after school, he came back. Sometimes there was a letter waiting, sometimes not. But when there was, the world around him sharpened. Smells became richer. The forest air felt alive against his skin. Every sound, from the scritch of squirrel claws to the low whistle of wind through branches, seemed to say, listen, something is happening here. He had 4 letters folded neatly in his drawer now, each from a different version of himself, each one written in a tone that felt like a different flavor of his own voice. One with cinnamon and theater dust, one with graphite fingerprints and grief, one with envy wrapped in compliments, and one with bitterness clenched like a fist. He reread them when the house was too quiet. Sometimes they read him back. The next letter came in the middle of a thunderstorm. He shouldn't have gone out. The sky had cracked open after school, spilling rain like it had something to prove. His mom was on the phone when he got home, pacing the living room in worn socks, her voice tired and flat. She didn't see him slip his hoodie on and slide out the back door. The woods were drenched. The rain hit the leaves in staggered rhythms, like drumming fingers. By the time he reached the mailbox, his jeans were soaked up to the knees and his shoes squelched with every step. But the flag was up. He opened the door, pulled the letter out with shaking hands. No envelope again, just a folded page. He didn't wait. Right there, in the cover of the crooked trees, under a canopy trembling with storm water, Eli read, "To the one who listens, it's strange how easy it is to forget that we are allowed to be small. My world doesn't like small things. Here, we are taught to sharpen our voices, to stand up straighter, to be more. There's this constant push to stretch beyond what feels natural, to become something remarkable. Teachers call it excellence. Parents call it expectations. I don't know what I call it except loud. Everyone wants me to be louder. But I think I envy your quiet. Sometimes I imagine myself in your shoes, walking alone through a forest, hearing only birds and breeze and maybe the occasional fox stepping over dry leaves. I imagine my mind being still for once, not spinning like it always is. They call me successful, confident, talented. But the truth is, I feel like a glass sculpture. Everyone sees the shine, not the cracks. Do you ever feel like you're not enough, but in a completely different way? Like you're not breaking, just never quite forming? I don't know if that makes sense. All I know is I think we're both versions of something unfinished. Maybe that's okay. Sincerely, Eli, who shines too brightly and breaks too easily. The paper trembled in his hands, not from rain, but recognition. This Eli was elegant, composed, articulate, but buried beneath the smooth words was something fragile, something aching. It reminded him of a cracked mirror. Still whole, but if you looked closely, you saw how the lines ran deep. For the first time since finding the mailbox, Eli hesitated. He didn't want to write back right away. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he did, and it scared him. These letters weren't just from other boys who shared his name. They were beginning to reflect things inside himself he hadn't known how to name. In the mirror of their words, he was starting to see parts of his own shadow. He wrote the response in his closet. Not for secrecy, but for silence. It was the only place in the house where the hum of the world seemed to hush for a moment. The old bulb overhead cast a dull orange glow, and he sat cross-legged among boxes of old coats and outgrown boots, the notebook balanced on his knees. To the Eli who glows too bright, I think I know the kind of quiet you want. Not silence that feels empty, but the kind that feels like a held breath, like a page before it's written on. I've never been called exceptional. Not once. I'm just the kid who reads too much, who stays home, who eats lunch alone because he doesn't mind it, even if maybe he does, sometimes. But your letter made me wonder something. What if your shine and my stillness are both ways of surviving? What if being small isn't failing but holding space? I think you and I are mirrors. Yours reflects out. Mine reflects in. Maybe together that makes us whole. From Eli, who is still learning how to be. He slid the letter into the mailbox the next morning before school. The storm had left the ground sticky and dark, and his shoes picked up streaks of wet mud. When he closed the mailbox door, he pressed his palm flat against the cold metal for a second longer than necessary. The wind rustled, like a whisper across glass. The next letter was only 3 sentences, scrawled in blocky handwriting that tilted downward like it couldn't be bothered to straighten itself. Don't look at me like I'm broken. I'm not. I just stopped pretending to be okay. That was it. No sign-off. No name. Just those words on a torn square of cardboard. No more than 3 inches across. Eli stared at it for a long time. There was something violent in the brevity. Not anger. Something quieter. Like exhaustion. This Eli wasn't asking to be understood. He was asking not to be fixed. Eli didn't write back that night. He didn't know how. Instead, he walked to the park behind the grocery store and sat on the swings long after the sky darkened. His hood up, hands deep in his sleeves, the stars blinking out one by one behind the clouds. He thought about what it meant to stop pretending. He thought about how many times he'd smiled when he didn't feel like it. And he wondered, not for the first time, if the versions of himself in these letters were closer to being real than he was. The final letter of the week came unexpectedly. Crisp, clean, folded with mathematical precision. Taped to the back was a photograph. Black and white, blurry. 2 figures in a forest clearing. One standing. One sitting on a bench that didn't exist in Eli's world. The figure standing held a letter. The other held a hand out to receive it. Eli flipped the photo over. 3 words, written in perfect cursive. "This is us." He stared at the photo so long the light changed around him. The trees shifted colors, birds passed overhead. The wind tugged gently at the corners of his sleeves. But Eli didn't move. A strange pressure filled his chest. Not quite pain, not quite joy, just the weight of being seen. That night he filled 5 pages. Not as answers, not as explanations, just thoughts, questions. He wrote about what it meant to wear a mask and not know where the skin ended. About whether being seen was the same as being understood. He asked if mirrors ever got tired of reflecting. He told them about the ache behind his ribs that didn't hurt until he noticed it. And then he stopped writing, folded the pages into a neat square, went to the woods, and left them in the box without reading them again. As he turned to walk away, the red flag lowered itself. But this time it clicked. A soft, mechanical sound, precise, almost deliberate. Eli turned back sharply. The mailbox sat still, unmoving, but something in it had changed. A gear had turned. A chamber had shifted. And though the sky above him had begun to gray, Eli suddenly felt warmer, like something inside the forest had welcomed him, not as a visitor, but as someone expected. Chapter 4. The Boy Who Couldn't Cry. It was the letter he almost didn't read that changed him. By then, the mailbox had become a ritual, a rhythm, the walk from school, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the way the canopy above seemed to hush when he stepped beneath it. Eli didn't even have to look at the trail anymore. His feet remembered. His body had memorized every route and curve of the path like it had been waiting its whole life to return. He didn't expect a letter that day. The flag was down. But he opened the box anyway, out of habit, not hope. It was there. A single envelope unlike the others. This one was sealed with clear tape along the edges. Corners folded down carefully like someone had taken their time. The paper was heavier than usual. Thicker, like it had absorbed something important. Eli hesitated. There was no name, no title, only a date, handwritten in blue ink at the top corner. October 11th. He didn't read it in the woods. He walked it home instead. He tucked it inside the back of his notebook, climbed the stairs, shut the door to his room, and sat at his desk with his palms flat on the wood like he was bracing for something. Then he peeled the tape, unfolded the letter, and read. "Dear me, it's been 19 days. I thought it would hurt. I thought I would cry, scream, break something, fall apart. But I haven't. I just wake up and go to school and come home and sit on the couch like I did before. The world looks exactly the same. That's the worst part. She's gone, and nothing feels different. I haven't cried once. Not at the hospital. Not at the funeral. Not even when they handed me her coat because she was still wearing it when they found her. I touched the sleeve and it was warm. And I still didn't cry. They keep asking me if I'm okay. People I've never spoken to before suddenly know my name. Teachers give me these long, heavy looks like I'm supposed to say something profound. My mom keeps touching my shoulder like she's checking to see if I'm real. I think she wants to cry for both of us. But I won't let her. I won't let anyone. Because what if once I start, I won't stop? What if all that silence pours out of me at once and I can't fit back inside my body? I don't want to be the boy whose sister died. I just want to be a person again. Not a ghost in someone else's memory. I know you probably don't understand. But maybe you will someday. If you do, please write me back. Not with advice. Not with answers. Just something true. Please. Eli." Eli didn't realize he was gripping the letter until his knuckles turned white. His eyes blurred the words, but not from tears. He felt nothing, and that terrified him. Because for the first time since the mailbox had entered his life, he didn't feel like he was reading a stranger's words. He felt like he was reading a future. He kept the letter under his pillow that night. Not out of sentiment. Not protection. It just felt wrong to put it in a drawer. He didn't sleep. The house was too still. The kind of stillness that made every floorboard creak louder. Every passing car too sharp. His mother's footsteps too far away, like she was moving through a different house entirely. In the morning, Eli skipped breakfast. He walked straight past the kitchen, out the door, and into the woods. The trail was darker now. Shadows leaned across it at odd angles. A crow followed him for nearly 5 minutes, hopping from branch to branch above, watching. When he reached the mailbox, the flag was down. Of course it was. Eli opened the door, slid the letter inside. No reply, no message, just silence. It felt appropriate. He didn't go back for 3 days. Not because he forgot, because he couldn't. Every time he reached for his jacket, something inside pulled back. Not fear, not laziness, something heavier, like gravity beneath his ribs. The sense that if he read another letter, the silence would crack open and swallow him. But on the third night, he dreamed of her. He didn't know her name, didn't know what she looked like, but in the dream, she was laughing, spinning in a hallway, wearing a yellow raincoat too big for her arms. And Eli was standing at the end of the hall, trying to reach her, but his legs wouldn't move. He woke with the name on his lips, Lucy. When he opened the mailbox that afternoon, there were 2 things inside. One was a letter. The other was a photograph. Black and white, crumpled at the edges. It showed a kitchen table. 2 cups of hot chocolate. One full, one half drunk. A small sweater draped over the back of a chair. No people, but somehow it felt full of presence. Eli unfolded the letter. Dear me, again. I wasn't going to write back. I felt stupid the second I dropped that first letter in. But something happened yesterday. I found her drawing book. She used to carry it everywhere. This little spiral thing with pink glitter stickers on the cover. I'd forgotten about it. But there it was, wedged under the couch cushions, like it had been hiding from the world. She'd filled every page. Dragons, castles, stars. One whole section just of clouds with faces. And on the last page, she drew me, sleeping, with a note in her tiny, slanted handwriting. He's a quiet hero. I lost it. Full collapse. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't see. I was curled up on the floor, hugging the book like it could bring her back. I finally cried. It didn't feel brave. It didn't feel like a breakthrough. It just felt human. And for the first time since she died, I didn't feel like I was stuck in the wrong version of myself. So thank you for listening, even in silence, even in absence. It helped me find the part of me I buried with her. Please don't forget that the quiet parts matter too. They always have. Eli. Eli pressed the letter to his chest, stood there, in the heart of the woods, while the wind pulled gently at the corners. The world didn't spin. It didn't shatter. But something shifted. A layer peeled back. The boy who had read dozens of letters, written dozens more, finally sat down beside the mailbox and let the stillness hold him. He didn't cry. Not yet. But for the first time in a long time, he wanted to. That night, he sat at his desk for hours. He didn't try to be eloquent. Didn't try to be poetic. He just wrote what was true. To the Eli who lost her, you don't need my words. You've already found your own. But thank you for letting me hold a piece of her with you. I think I understand now. Pain doesn't always shout. Sometimes it sits quietly beside you, waiting for you to look it in the eyes. When you finally do, it doesn't hurt less. But it becomes real. And somehow that matters. If I ever lose something like that, someone, I hope I remember your letter. And I hope someone like you is out there, writing to me. From Eli. He left it in the mailbox the next morning, then sat with it for a while, watched the trees sway, watched the clouds unravel into thin strands of light. When he stood to leave, he didn't feel lighter. He just felt true. And that was enough. Chapter 5. Infinite skies, same moon. It began with the quiet. Not the kind that falls when people leave or when something ends. This quiet was bigger than that. Pressed against the windows. Bled into the corners of the room. A hush so wide and full, it made Eli feel like a single thought inside an empty cathedral. He hadn't meant to stay up that night. But when he opened his bedroom window for air, he noticed something was missing. The stars. Not hidden, gone. Even on cloudy nights, there was usually some glow behind the veil. A faint silver hint. A patch of charcoal sky. But this was blank. Like someone had scraped the sky clean and forgotten to put it back. He stood there for a long time, listening. There were no crickets. No wind. Not even the distant rumble of a passing car. Just silence. The kind that begged to be broken. So Eli slipped on his shoes and walked into it. The woods felt different at night. Not frightening, just unfamiliar. Trees that had always felt like shelter now loomed. Branches that once brushed the sky now clutched at the darkness, uncertain of what they were meant to hold. Eli kept his flashlight low, careful not to pierce the illusion too sharply. The path was still there, etched into the forest floor by repetition and time, but it felt more like a memory than a trail. Like he was walking through a version of the world that didn't know it was being watched. The mailbox waited for him at the edge of the clearing, half-shadowed under a tangle of boughs. And the flag was up. Not just up, glowing. It shimmered with a faint, unnatural blue, as if the metal itself had swallowed a sliver of moonlight that no longer existed. Eli hesitated, then opened the box. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No envelope, no folds, just a letter, cut square and clean, with writing that looked mechanical at first glance, but wavered slightly at the ends of each line, like someone trying very hard not to shake. To me, who can still see the stars, I have a question. Do they make you feel small? Not in a bad way. I don't mean insignificant. I mean in the way that makes your chest hurt a little, in that deep, aching way that says you exist, but so does everything else. I've read about stars. Our books still talk about them, the old ones. My grandfather used to describe them like freckles on the skin of heaven. Said they were reminders that there's more above than what we'll ever reach. I wish I could have seen them. We lost our sky when I was 5. That's what they tell us, anyway. Some atmospheric failure. Global dimming. Too much dust in the upper stratosphere. I don't understand the science. No one really does anymore. There was a war, then a blackout, and then one day the sky didn't come back. It's just a ceiling now. Flat, dull, lightless. The sun rises and sets because the satellites still mimic it. But it's not real. None of it is. There's no moon, no stars, no night worth waiting for. I've never seen a real sky. Never looked up and felt anything. That's why I'm writing you. Because in all the letters I've read from the mailbox, yours, mine, ours, you're the only one who seems to know what it means to be small in a way that matters. So please, tell me what the stars feel like. Describe them like no one's watching. Because I am. Eli. Eli had to sit down. Not because he was overwhelmed. Not because the words hit too hard. But because he didn't know how to hold something that sacred while standing. He looked up. Still nothing. A sky that refused to answer. But now, at least, he wasn't alone beneath it. He didn't write back right away. Felt wrong to rush. Instead, Eli began noticing the sky again. Not the big, open poetry of it, but the small things. The slow fading of orange into plum as the sun left. The wink of a single star through the curtain of clouds. The shape of the moon when it was barely more than a memory. He started sleeping with the blinds open, just in case something showed itself. And on the 4th night, it did. A single patch of sky, torn open above the woods. Clouds moved like pulled silk. And there it was, the moon. Half-lit, drifting slow and sure above the tree line. Eli stared so long his eyes watered. It wasn't even full, just a crescent, a suggestion, but it glowed. Not like a light, like a truth. And he ran. When he reached the mailbox, he was out of breath. The clearing pulsed with silver. Dew shimmered on the grass like tiny constellations. The box itself looked ancient and enchanted all at once. He opened the door and placed the letter inside. No envelope, just words raw and recent. To the me who's never seen the moon, I don't know how to answer your question. Because stars aren't just seen, they're felt. They're not like city lights or lanterns or flashlights. They're quieter, older. They don't shine so much as exist. And somehow that's brighter. They don't care if you look at them, but they let you. And in that letting, you remember how small you are. And that smallness, it's beautiful. Because it means you're not alone. It means you're part of something that's still expanding, still reaching. The stars don't demand anything. They just keep being there. Even when you stop watching. Even when you forget to look up. I hope someday you find your own way to feel them. Even if it's not with your eyes. Even if it's only through a letter. From Eli. He watched the moon for a long time that night. Not for signs. Not for magic. Just to remind himself it was real. That he was too. And that somewhere, across dimensions or dreams or broken skies, a version of him might be reading his words under a ceiling of nothing, learning how to feel stars with a heart that hadn't forgotten how. Chapter 6. The One Who Stayed Quiet. The first thing he noticed was the handwriting. It wasn't neat but not messy either, just unsure. The way someone writes when they haven't written in a long time. Not just letters, anything. There were no loops in the Y's. No flare in the eyes. No underlines. It felt less like a message and more like someone holding their breath on paper. Eli had found it just before sunset. He wasn't looking for a letter. He hadn't checked the mailbox in 2 days. His mind had been elsewhere, lingering on the stars, the moon, the ache of being seen across versions. But something had tugged at him again, that familiar sense that he was being watched not by a person, but by possibility. When he opened the mailbox, there was only one letter. No envelope, just a single sheet, creased twice. He read it right there in the clearing with the trees watching. To whoever's listening, I don't know what I'm doing. I've had this paper for days, maybe longer. I'm not sure why I'm even writing. No one's ever answered before. Not really. I've gotten letters. I've read them, but I never wrote back. I wanted to. I just didn't know how. Sometimes I don't talk for whole days. Not out loud. Not even to myself. My mom thinks I'm shy. My teachers think I'm lazy. I think I'm just scared that if I start talking, people will realize I don't actually have anything to say. Everyone else seems to come alive when they speak. I vanish. So I stay quiet. It's easier that way. People don't expect much from silence. They don't ask what's underneath it. But I'm tired of being a wall no one knocks on. So if you're reading this, knock. Just once. Even if I don't answer. Eli. It was the simplest letter he'd ever received. No metaphors. No stories. No dramatic confessions or surreal world shifts. But it stopped Eli cold. Because it didn't feel like it had been written for a reader. It felt like someone had carved it out of themselves in the dark, hoping, just hoping, someone might find it. A quiet SOS, buried under layers of practiced stillness. And it rattled something in him. Not pity, recognition. That night, Eli lay awake long after the world had settled. His room glowed softly with the street lamp outside, casting slow amber ripples across the ceiling. He didn't move, barely blinked. He was remembering. Not a specific moment, just a feeling. That odd, suspended state he sometimes slipped into when everyone around him was talking and laughing and filling the air, and he was just there, watching it all happen, present, but not included. Not excluded either, which somehow made it worse, because that meant it wasn't about being pushed away. It meant he'd chosen not to step in. And that choice, quiet, habitual, invisible, had begun to define him. He didn't write back immediately. Not because he didn't know what to say. Because he knew exactly what to say. And that was the problem. He sat at his desk for hours, his pencil hovering, waiting for courage. And when it came, it didn't arrive in a rush. Came slowly, carefully, like someone knocking. Once, softly, to the me who's still hiding. I know what it feels like to disappear without leaving. To sit through an entire conversation and walk away feeling emptier than before. To be in a room full of people who like you, but not one of them knows you. I know what it's like to think, if I speak, I'll break something. Or worse, if I speak, no one will notice. But here's something I've learned just from reading letters from all of us, from you, from me. Silence is not proof of nothing. It's proof of weight. And just because no one's hearing it doesn't mean it isn't heavy. You don't have to fill the room to be real in it. Sometimes being quiet is brave. But don't let it be your cage. You deserve to echo too. I hear you. From Eli. He didn't leave it in the mailbox that night. He folded the letter slowly, placed it in his notebook, and slept with it near his pillow. Not for magic, just for the memory of trying. The next morning, when he dropped the letter in the box, he didn't expect a reply. But he waited anyway, sat cross-legged on the grass for almost an hour, drawing lazy circles in the dirt with a stick, letting the forest's breath fill the space between. And just as he stood to leave, the flag moved, a slow, uncertain twitch. Eli froze, then opened the box. Inside, a post-it note, just 5 words, scrawled like someone was out of breath. Still here, still listening. Thanks. That afternoon at school, Eli did something different. At lunch, when 2 classmates were talking about a movie he'd seen, he didn't stay silent. He didn't force a laugh or nod passively. He just spoke. A sentence. A real one. Not clever, not loud, but true. And they didn't stop and stare. They didn't treat him like a statue that had suddenly started moving. They just replied. Welcomed it. And for the rest of the lunch, he didn't vanish. That night, Eli sat by his window again, notebook open, waiting. Not for a reply, for something else. Something possible. And when the moon finally broke through the clouds, he smiled. Not because it was bright, but because it reminded him, even light has to push through silence sometimes. Chapter 7, The Mirror That Lied. There were mirrors Eli had learned not to look at. The one in the hallway, too tall, too honest. The bathroom one, too harsh, especially under the flickering light. And the worst, the closet mirror, the one angled just enough to catch you when you weren't expecting it. When your body was relaxed, unguarded, real. He didn't hate mirrors. Not exactly. He just didn't trust them. Because they always showed something different from what he felt. Or maybe they showed exactly what he felt, and that was the problem. Either way, he'd started walking past them without flinching. Not confidence, just practice. Emotional callous. But that didn't mean the feelings were gone. Just tucked under layers. Like a bruise under skin, hidden, but tender. The letter arrived folded in thirds. No envelope, no decoration, no initials. It was crisp, clean, and clinical on the outside. Inside, it felt like something raw had been carved open and pinned to the page. Eli read it on his bedroom floor, legs folded, the late afternoon light slicing across his knees like quiet gold. To the version of me who can look in the mirror. What do you see? I don't ask to be poetic. I ask because I genuinely don't know. I've never seen myself. Not really. Not as I am. Where I live, the mirrors lie. Not metaphorically. Literally. They reflect what others think you are, not what you know yourself to be. You wake up and walk to the bathroom and stare at a version of yourself that doesn't fit. Not just physically, but viscerally. And the worst part is you start to believe it. The world around you confirms it, points to it, smiles at it, labels it. But inside, there's a scream no one else hears. Not because it's silent, because it's not theirs. I don't know what I look like anymore. What's real, what's imagined, what's performed just to get through the day without breaking something. But sometimes I dream vivid dreams, where I'm in a body that feels like home. I move through it without flinching. I laugh without rehearsing. I exist without correction. And I wake up crying. Because the mirror takes it all away. Every time. Tell me, how do you survive being seen? How do you see yourself and not shatter? Eli. Eli stared at the letter for a long time. Not because he was confused. Because he understood too well. He remembered 4th grade. When his arms had started to feel wrong. Not too long or too short, just not his. He remembered the sick twist in his stomach when someone called him adorable, in a tone that pinned him into a version of himself he didn't recognize. He remembered his reflection at 12, wearing a shirt that was supposed to fit, standing in a dressing room while his mother waited expectantly outside, and thinking, this isn't mine. But he had no words for it back then. Only feelings. Slippery, slanted feelings he couldn't hold long enough to name. But the letter named them. And in doing so, unsealed something he hadn't touched in years. He didn't write back right away. This wasn't a response he could rush. Instead, he stood up, walked to the hallway, faced the mirror he usually ignored, and looked, not at his face, at the spaces between, the tilt of his shoulders, the way his expression sat awkwardly on features he hadn't chosen, the way he tried to shrink without realizing it. He didn't hate it, but he didn't recognize it either. And maybe that was the worst part. That night he wrote slowly, carefully, with the kind of precision that comes not from fear, but from respect. To the me who lives in the lie, sometimes I survive by not looking. Other times I survive by looking differently, not at what the mirror says, but at what I feel before I see anything. There's a version of me that only exists in the dark, right before I fall asleep, when no one's watching, not even myself. That version laughs too loud, slouches without shame, wears whatever makes him feel powerful, and never explains his name. That version is real, even if the mirror doesn't show him, even if no one else sees him, because I do. In those quiet, unguarded moments, I am him. And if I can be him in even one moment, that means he exists. You exist. More than the reflection. More than the war in your skin. More than the assumptions stacked against your shape and voice and walk. You're not wrong. The mirror is. And sometimes surviving isn't about seeing clearly. It's about believing deeply. From Eli. He walked the letter to the mailbox just before dusk. The woods were unusually still. Not a warning. A holding of breath. The way nature sometimes paused, like it knew something sacred was being sent. He slid the letter in gently, waited, didn't expect anything. But as he turned to leave, there it was. A flicker. The flag rose half an inch, then settled again. He opened the box. Inside a photo. Blurry, low-res, probably from a webcam, but unmistakable. A face, not the one from the mirror, but the one from the dreams. No caption, just a post-it stuck to the back. This is how I see me now. Thank you. That night, Eli let himself look in the mirror again. Not to critique, not to test his healing, just to greet himself. And in his reflection's eyes, something had changed. Not the shape, not the features, but the presence. A soft defiance, a quiet truth. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't flinch. He didn't fade. He just stood there. Still. Real. Enough. Chapter 8. The version that left too soon. The letter wasn't addressed to him. Not directly. There was no to Eli. No dear me. It was folded inside a cream-colored envelope with rough edges and faded corners. As if it had lived in someone's pocket for too long. There was something worn about it. Not damaged. Just held. Carried. Like it had been with someone until the very end. When Eli opened it, the paper smelled faintly of citrus and dust. The handwriting was neater than most. Almost careful, like each letter had been written with the understanding it might be the last. He sat down by the creek near the mailbox, the sun softening over the tree line. The water moved lazily over the stones. The wind kept its distance. And he read, "To the Eli who still walks. I won't be there when you read this. Not in the way that counts. But don't be afraid. This isn't a goodbye. It's more like a footprint. Something left behind to say, I was here. You don't know me. And yet you do. I was 13 when I stopped writing letters. I was 14 when I stopped writing anything. 15 when I stopped believing the world had a place shaped like me. I didn't leave in a blaze of anger. There was no final cry, just a slow unraveling, a quiet fall inward. But before that, before I wrote this, one letter, one chance to be found in the echoes. I don't remember much about that year. Only fragments. A notebook with nothing but beginnings. A jacket I wore even in the heat because it felt like armor. The feeling of floating above myself in crowds, like watching someone I used to be play pretend. And the woods. Always the woods. I went there a lot, even when I wasn't looking for the mailbox anymore. Not to find something, just to be. Trees don't ask questions. They don't expect apologies. They don't tell you what kind of boy you should be. Sometimes I wonder if things could have gone differently. If I had written one more letter. If someone had answered one I already sent. If I'd really known that there were other versions of me who made it, who grew. But I didn't. And now I'm here wherever here is. I'm not angry. I'm not even sad. I just wish I could have stayed long enough to see who we became. You're holding this letter. That means you did. You stayed. So please, for both of us, keep going. Every breath you take now is one I didn't. That doesn't mean you owe me anything. It just means you get to carry a little more light. Let it be enough. Let you be enough. With all the love I didn't know how to give myself. Eli. The paper trembled in his hands, but not from the wind. There were no dramatic tears. No collapse. Just silence. The kind that swells so big inside you it feels holy. He didn't know how long he sat there. Long enough for the creek to lose its sparkle. Long enough for a single bird to land on a nearby branch and watch him, head tilted like it knew. When he finally stood, his legs ached. But something else had shifted too. A gentler ache. Quieter. One that made room rather than taking it away. Eli didn't write back that night. He couldn't. Because how do you answer someone who isn't there? Someone who left without hearing any of this? And still, somehow, made space for him to live more fully? Instead, he wrote something else. Not a reply. A thank you. He walked to the mailbox just after sunrise. Mist clung low to the ground. The woods felt washed clean. He knelt, opened the box, and placed his page inside. But this time, he didn't close the door. He left it open. Let the letter sit in the breeze. Not to send it somewhere. Just to let the world read it. To the me who didn't stay. I'm here. I'm still here. And I'm holding you, even if I never got to meet you. You are not a failure. You are not a shame to carry. You are not a ghost I'm trying to outrun. You are a part of me. The part that saw the edge. The part that felt too much. The part that kept going even when it didn't look like it. You mattered. You still matter. I will remember you. I will walk for both of us. And I will speak your name, not as a shadow, but as a light. With all the breath I have left. Eli. When he got home, the world felt different. Not smaller. Not heavier. Just more. Like someone had painted another layer into the sky. And when Eli looked in the mirror that evening, he didn't see grief or guilt. He saw a promise. And he meant to keep it. Chapter 9, The One Who Forgot. It had been almost 2 weeks since the last letter. Eli kept going to the mailbox anyway. Not because he expected anything, but because the habit had become part of his rhythm. Like brushing his teeth or stepping around the creaky floorboard in the upstairs hallway. The mailbox was just there now. A quiet constant. Even without a letter, the walk to it made him feel included. like he was still part of something larger than himself. A thread in a web of boys who all shared the same name and the same fragile hunger to understand themselves. So when the 9th letter came, it almost surprised him. Not because he'd given up hope, but because he'd stopped needing hope to go there at all. It arrived in a black envelope, the only one of its kind so far. The paper felt strange, smooth but heavy, almost like slate. There was no return name, no title, just a single silver-inked word in the center. Remember. He opened it on the front porch, curled into the old deck chair, blanket wrapped around his knees even though it wasn't cold. The letter was typed. Font, courier. Format, formal. Tone, confused. Confidential record number 199 DW subject. Unknown, male, approximate. Age 13 to 15, location. Undisclosed. I was instructed to write this letter even though I don't remember doing so. Let me clarify. I don't know who I am. I woke up 3 weeks ago in a room with white walls, white floors, and no windows. There was a bed, a desk, a mirror, and a note. The note said, "Your name is Eli. You are safe. Write until you remember. I have written 72 letters. This is the only one that doesn't start with Dear Me, because I'm not sure I am me. I don't recognize the name. I don't recognize the handwriting in the note, though something in me believes it anyway. I don't recognize myself. They say memory is tied to emotion. But what if emotion is what I forgot? What if that's the real loss? Not the dates or places or names, but the weight of things. The part that makes you care whether the sky is blue or the water is cold or the face in the mirror smiles back. Every day I wake up and wonder, who did I used to be? Was I kind? Did I laugh too loudly? Did I love things I can't remember now? Was I afraid of the dark? Did I write letters like this one once for someone else? I can't answer. But I send this because maybe you can. Maybe you know me. Or maybe you just remember how to feel. Either way, if you're reading this, you're further along than I am. And that gives me hope. Sincerely, I don't know yet. Eli blinked. Read it again. And again. There was no emotion in the letter. Not in the way the others had it. It was hollow, clinical, but not cold. It reminded him of the way a child might describe a nightmare without fully understanding what fear is. A strange distance. And yet, under the surface, something ached. He went upstairs to his room, sat on the floor, pulled out his box of letters, flipped through them. He wanted to see himself again, to find the shape of who he'd been in all those other lives. Not just to remember, but to anchor the boy who had forgotten. And something inside him whispered, this could have been me. Not in a distant, theoretical way, but in a real one. What if he'd stopped writing after the 3rd letter? What if he'd stopped going to the mailbox? What if he'd stopped asking questions? Would he have drifted like that into a clean, blank room where his name was just a word someone told him to believe? He didn't write a letter this time. He wrote a map. It wasn't made of directions or steps. It was made of memories, fragments, images. Not to explain who Eli was, but to offer a way back. He folded the page slowly, tucked it in an envelope, light blue this time, and on the front, in his own crooked handwriting, to the Eli I won't let disappear. That night he dreamed. He was standing in a white room. At first he thought he was alone, but then he saw the boy. He was sitting at a desk, writing, hair hanging over one eye, shoulders hunched, mouth set in that quiet line Eli knew all too well. The boy didn't look up, didn't speak. But when Eli stepped closer, he saw something beside the desk. A stack of letters, dozens of them, all unopened, all from versions of himself. And just as Eli reached for the top one, the boy finally looked up, eyes wide. A flicker of knowing passed between them. And in the silence, Eli said, not aloud, but through the dream, you're not lost. He woke up with tears on his cheek and the faintest memory of a mirror. Not his, but the boy's. Clean, empty, but waiting. The next day, he checked the mailbox again. It was empty. That was okay. He didn't need a letter. Not this time, because some chapters weren't about being answered. Some were about leaving something behind for the version of yourself that can't speak yet, and hoping, trusting that one day they will. Chapter 10, The One Who Stayed Quiet. There was something different about the envelope. Not the color, plain white. Not the paper, standard, a little creased. It was the weight of it. Thicker, heavier. Eli turned it in his hands. Something shifted inside. More than just a letter. A second page, maybe, or an object. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he walked the whole way home with it pressed between his palms like it might slip away if he wasn't careful. When he finally sat at his desk and unfolded the flap, a thin strip of black ribbon fluttered into his lap. He picked it up. It smelled faintly of smoke and soap. No explanation, no tag, just the ribbon and the letter. To the Eli who speaks. I never did. Not once. Not out loud. The first time I felt the words rise, I swallowed them. Not because I was afraid of what I'd say, but because I wasn't sure anyone would listen. And eventually it became a habit. Not speaking was easier. Kept me small enough to hide. It made the world feel softer, less demanding, quieter. But the silence grew sharp over time. It started cutting into things. It sliced away chances to say I was lonely, that I was happy, that I missed someone, that I was here. And no one noticed, because I never made a sound to begin with. If no one hears your voice, it's easy for them to imagine you're fine. And after a while, I started imagining it too. There's a word I learned once. Aphonic. It means voiceless. But I was never that. Not really. I had a voice. I just chose not to use it. And the longer I stayed silent, the more the world started to sound like a place I didn't belong. Sometimes I wonder, if I'd spoken once, just once, would things have changed? Would someone have leaned in? Would someone have said, "Hey, I hear you"? I don't know. But I'm writing this now because I want to believe in you. In the version of me who found a voice, even if it trembled, even if it cracked, even if it only said one word once. Speak for me. Say the things I couldn't. Let your words be mine even now, because somewhere in this silence, I'm still listening. Eli. Eli stared at the page, not because he didn't understand, but because he did, more than he wanted to admit. There were whole weeks in his life when he hadn't said anything that wasn't required of him. He'd gone to school, answered when called on, said thanks and I'm fine and see you. But real words, ones that belonged to him, he'd kept those locked in his throat like valuables he wasn't brave enough to wear outside. He turned the ribbon over in his fingers again. It reminded him of something, though he couldn't place what. A bookmark, maybe, or a sash from a school project. Or no, a shoelace. That was it. The texture. And suddenly he remembered a pair of dress shoes he'd worn once to a cousin's wedding. One had come untied, and he hadn't spoken up about it. Just tripped twice on the dance floor, pretending it was part of the song. He hadn't wanted to interrupt anyone. Even his pain had been silent. He picked up a pen, not to write back directly, but to write to himself, the self here, now, the version that could speak but still sometimes didn't. He wrote, "Your voice is not a mistake. .it is not too loud. .it is not too soft. .it is not wrong. .it is yours." Then he whispered the words aloud. To the window, to the trees, to the ribbon still curled on his desk. He didn't know what difference it made, only that it felt like cracking a window in a room that had grown stale. That night he practiced speaking. Alone. In his room. In front of the mirror. He said his name out loud, over and over. He read paragraphs from old letters. He spoke the names of the boys he'd been, the brave one, the lonely one, the one who danced, the one who left too soon, and the one who stayed quiet. He said that name last, softly, almost like a prayer. Then, as his throat tightened and his chest shook, he added, "I hear you." The next morning, he walked to the mailbox early. Not to deliver, just to stand there, to let the wind touch his skin, to hear the rustle of the leaves like they were whispering back. He held the ribbon in his hand like it was a thread tying one version of himself to another. And he whispered, "Thank you." When he got home, he found his mom at the kitchen table. She was peeling oranges, the citrus sharp and clean in the air. He sat across from her, hands in his lap. And after a long pause, he said, "Mom." She looked up, smiled. "Yeah." And he said, "I just wanted to talk. No reason, no crisis, just that." She blinked, then said, "Okay." And they sat there peeling oranges together, talking, just talking. And outside the window, the wind carried his words away like birds, not to hide them, but to set them free. Chapter 11, The One Who Had Everything. The envelope was gold. Not shiny, not metallic, just warm, almost like parchment left too long in the sun. Felt expensive, but not in a flashy way. Understated, thoughtful. Eli turned it over and noticed something new. A wax seal, pale blue, pressed with a symbol. Not a letter. A tiny sun, rising over a hill. The seal broke cleanly when he opened it. No ashes, no hidden ribbons. Just 2 pages, folded crisply, as though they'd been ironed flat. He expected the writing to be typed or printed. But it wasn't. It was ink. Real ink. Flowing and practiced with the ease of someone who wrote often, and not just out of habit but joy. Dear me, I was the lucky one. At least that's what they'd say if they saw me. 2 parents still married. A big backyard with a treehouse Dad and I built ourselves. A little sister who actually likes me. A best friend I've known since we were 4. I'm good at school. Decent at sports. My piano teacher says I play like I mean it. I laugh a lot. People like me. I like me. So why do I feel hollow sometimes? Why? When the house is quiet and the lights are out, do I lie awake staring at the ceiling wondering what's missing? I'm not sad. Not really. Just restless. Like I'm waiting for something I can't name. Like there's a version of me somewhere else who sees more clearly. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're the one who didn't get the perfect life. Maybe you had to work harder, love harder, believe harder. And maybe that made you stronger in ways I'll never be. It's weird, right? To envy someone who might envy you back. But I do. I envy your edge, your mystery, your need to ask questions, and the courage it must have taken to even find this mailbox. Because me, I didn't look. I stumbled across it. Literally tripped over the roots around it during a run. I almost ignored it, but something told me to stop, to read, to write, and so I did. And now I can't stop thinking about the other versions of me. The ones who struggled. The ones who fought for what I was handed. You probably think I'm soft. Maybe I am. But here's the thing. Even a full life can feel lonely if no one sees all the way in. And somehow, writing this makes me feel like someone finally does. So I want to ask something selfish. Will you write me back? Tell me what it's like where you are. Tell me what you lost and how you made it matter anyway. Because I want to believe my comfort hasn't made me shallow. I want to know that I'm real, even without the scars. Yours, Eli. Eli let out a slow breath. He was glad to be sitting down. Because the letter didn't sting in the way some of the others had. It didn't hurt because it was sad. It hurt because it was so full, so bright, so gently normal. And yet, even that wasn't enough. That was what turned the ache inside him. Even the happiest Eli still needed to be seen. Still needed proof that being loved didn't mean being known. He glanced at his own room. Peeling paint. Stacks of books with no shelves. The framed photo of his dad on the dresser, next to a candle that had long burned out. He'd always assumed the better life would fix things, that the right friends, the right house, the right family would seal the cracks in his heart. But maybe cracks didn't seal. Maybe they just shifted. Maybe some versions of him were just better at painting over them. He opened a new page in his notebook. This one didn't feel like it needed ink. It needed voice. He spoke the words as he wrote them, soft at first, then steadier. Dear Eli, I don't envy you. Not because you don't deserve what you have, but because I've seen what the dark looks like, and I'm proud of how I still glow. Your light is real. I know that, but it's different than mine. I had to build mine out of sparks. Out of nights where the ceiling was the only thing that heard me cry. Out of quiet mornings where the mailbox was the loudest thing in my world. You asked me what I lost. I lost a father. Not to death, but to leaving. And I lost the version of myself who thought love was something I had to earn. But I got him back, piece by piece. Letter by letter. I'm still learning how to hold him. But I'm not letting go again. So don't let go of your version of you either. Because he matters even if the world already loves him. He matters because you see him now. And I do too. He sealed the letter. Used red wax this time, bright and warm. Pressed his thumb into it for a seal. And on the front, he wrote, to the boy who glows even in daylight. That night, the stars were hidden behind clouds. But Eli sat outside anyway, notebook open, hands loose, breathing slow. He didn't know if the boy with everything would ever write back again. Didn't know if he'd even need to. Maybe this version of him just needed to know he was real. That all his joy didn't make him shallow. That having something didn't mean he owed anyone pain. And maybe, just maybe, that was the lesson. You don't have to hurt to be worth loving. Chapter 12, The One Who Disappeared. Eli felt it before he saw it. A hush, like the woods had swallowed their own sound. No birdsong, no rustling. Even the wind held its breath. The mailbox door hung slightly ajar. That had never happened before. He approached slowly, like the mailbox might wake up and say something. Inside, one envelope. Gray. Almost silver, but not quite. No wax seal. No name on the front. No weight to it either. It felt empty. For a second, Eli thought it was. But when he opened it, a single folded sheet of paper fell into his hand. Blank. No ink. No crease but the center fold. No signature. Nothing. Eli turned it over, held it up to the sun, looked for hidden marks, invisible ink, pressure lines, something. But there was nothing. No words. No message. Just the silence of paper. Back in his room, he tried again. Heat from a lamp. Steam from the bathroom faucet. Even a lemon wedge squeezed onto the paper. Still blank. Still silent. And somehow that felt louder than anything else he'd ever read. Because what kind of Eli sends nothing? What kind of version of him needs to send something, but can't? That night he dreamed of a boy with no face. Just a body standing in the woods where the mailbox should have been. But the box was gone, and so was the path, and when Eli called out, his own voice didn't echo. He woke up with a start. The letter was still on his desk. Still blank, but not empty. Not anymore. Now it felt like it was full of everything he didn't know. He wrote anyway, this time not in response, but for the version who'd disappeared. Because maybe that boy didn't vanish. Maybe he just got lost. And maybe letters don't always need to be answered. Sometimes maybe they need to be found. To the Eli who couldn't write, I don't know where you went. I don't know what happened. But I felt it. You were there. Even in the blankness. Even in the quiet. Maybe your world ran out of time. Or maybe you did. Maybe you stopped believing. Or maybe something stopped you. I hope that's not true. I hope you're still out there. Trying. Breathing. Thinking about writing but not quite able to. If you are, let this be a light. A page that holds your place. A space that says you mattered. Because you did. Even if your letter never came, even if the words never reached me, you mattered. You matter. And if one day someone finds your letter and it's still blank, I hope they know it wasn't a mistake. It was your voice, even in silence. And I heard it. Eli. He folded the letter carefully, placed it in a dark blue envelope, the color of twilight just before stars. And for the first time, he didn't take it to the mailbox. Instead, he tucked it inside a book on his shelf, one he hadn't read yet. He didn't know why. It just felt right. Maybe one day he'd find it again, or someone else would, and they'd ask the same questions, and maybe they'd write their own reply. That week, the mailbox stayed empty. Eli checked every day, twice once, not because he expected anything, but because he needed to. He needed to be seen looking. He needed to tell the world, I'm still listening. On the 7th day, he found something. Not a letter. A stone. Small. Smooth. White. Curved slightly, like it had once been part of something larger. A shell? A fragment? There was no note with it. No explanation. Just the weight of something real. He held it in his palm for a long time, then placed it beside the blank letter on his desk, and whispered, I won't forget you. That night he walked into the woods. Not to the mailbox, just deeper, following no path, letting the hush settle around him again. And when he reached the clearing where the trees opened just enough to see the sky, he sat down, looked up, and said, Thank you. For what, he wasn't sure. Maybe just the chance to speak. Maybe the quiet needed to finally feel like someone was missing. Because some absences are their own kind of presence. And some letters don't need words to change everything. Chapter 13, The One Who Writes Back. The mailbox hadn't opened in 12 days. Eli didn't count, not out loud. But he knew. 12 mornings walking the path. 12 times opening the door. 12 empty hands. He didn't feel disappointed. Not this time. The silence wasn't a punishment. It was a breath. A long, still breath before the next step. He sat in the woods longer than usual, knees pulled to his chest, watching wind nudge the tops of the ferns. He thought about the versions of himself he'd met. The Eli who was brave. The one who ran. The one who felt too much. The one who felt nothing at all. The one who laughed like life couldn't break him. The one who wanted to disappear. And the one who couldn't write. Each letter had been a mirror, but not a flat one. More like water. Wavering, deep, reflecting not only his face, but his fears, his hopes, his possibility. And now the water was still. No more ripples. No more letters. Just himself. That night he sat at his desk. Not waiting. Not searching. Just ready. The blank page didn't scare him like it used to. It didn't accuse or threaten or mock. It invited. He picked up his pen and wrote his final letter. Dear me, you don't need to check the mailbox tomorrow. Not because there's nothing left to find, but because you've already found it. Not in the letters. In you. You're not all the versions you met. You're not broken because they are. You're not better because some weren't. You're just you. And that's enough. You're the version who stayed. The one who kept reading. The one who kept feeling, even when it hurt. You're the one who wanted to understand. And now you do. Not everything, but enough to begin. So let yourself begin. Make the friends. Say the hard things. Love harder than you think you're allowed. Mess up. Try again. Be okay even when you're not perfect. Stop waiting for permission to be seen. You're already here. You've always been here. You're the one who writes back. And I'm proud of you. With love, Eli. He folded the letter carefully, hands trembling a little, not from fear, but from fullness. He stepped outside in bare feet, cool dirt under his soles, the air smelling faintly of honeysuckle and pine. The stars were out wild and endless. He walked the path one last time. The mailbox was waiting. Still, patient, he opened the door and slid the letter inside. Paused, then whispered, "Thank you." Not to the mailbox, not to the letters, but to himself, to all the selves he'd been, and all the ones he still might become. When he let go of the envelope, it didn't fall. It lifted, a gentle motion, like it was being pulled up from underneath. And when he stepped back, the letter was gone. The mailbox empty. Light filled the woods then. Not a beam, not a flash, just a softening. As though the trees had learned how to glow. And Eli stood in it. Not lost, not waiting, just here. The next day, he didn't go to the mailbox. He didn't need to. Instead, he sat in his room, opened a new notebook, and began to write again. Not to himself this time, but to the world, to the friend he hadn't made yet, to the sister he wished he'd known, to the boy on the other side of a different mirror, to anyone who needed to hear, "You are not alone." And in a way, the letters never stopped, because some stories don't end when the last page turns. Some stories begin with the one who learns to write back. Another story ends, but the cozy never does. See you soon.